Sorry, I had to push buttons, everybody. Thanks for joining us on today's SOPP. And as always, I'm Kevin Bell. It's a pleasure to have you all. With me, as always, I've got my amazing, my beautiful, my co host, Betsy Cunningham, the one and the only. And of course, we've got our regular guests if they'd like to introduce themselves too.
Okay, I'll go first. I'm John Hunter. I'm with Community Rights, Douglas County, and the Oregon Community Rights Network. And I'm probably the oldest guy in the room, but
We're all young at heart.
yeah, I try to be. Yes.
I'm Zach Whitworth, born and raised in Roseburg. I'm currently in Eugene. I'm an historian and a graduate student at the University of Oregon. I'm also affiliated with the Institute for Social Ecology based in Vermont. Always happy to be here.
Dean Zehner, he, him pronouns, Douglas County resident for about 23 years and just love doing this and do a lot of other things also, but just represent myself tonight.
It's always great to have Dan on, a favorite of ours. Anybody else want to join in and let us know before we go on to our special guest? One Mississippi, two Mississippi, three Mississippi. Awesome. Well, we are joined and privileged here today to be joined by the student organizer who's going in Roseburg right now and leading the student effort against ICE in Roseburg. So, can you kind of introduce yourself for us, Donovan?
Yeah, thank you. My name's Donovan. I'm a senior at Roseburg High School. I've been involved in politics since I was probably 8 or 9 years old for the 2016 election, and really since then, I've tried to stay as engaged as possible. Um, on April 27th, I'm leading a walkout with students from Roseburg High School in protest of ICE trying to rent office space here in Roseburg. Um, I posted previously that it was going to be at the courthouse, but some stuff came up with permits, and it's actually going to be across the street from Roseburg High School. Um, but regardless of that, I invite everyone who's listening to come attend April 27th at 2 o'clock across from the high school.
Yeah, and we're going to make sure everybody can get out there too, because this is a really important effort. And I mean, that's a good question. Who, what, and where, why, and how we can help is some of the topics we wanted to bring for you right now. But just off the top of my head, Betsy, do we need permits like that? Because I know we've organized outside the courthouse before. No,
That's news to me.
but that's one of the things we'd love to help you out with here because I don't think we need a permit, dude. We'll show up there if we need to. But so I'm glad to know that it's updated right now and it's across from the high school and you're still doing all that good stuff. So we'll make sure to get those flyers out for you and see how we can get. Betsy, I'm not didn't mean to cut you off.
No, and I was just going to ask, are you also going to go to the city council meeting? Because the city council that night will probably actually have this formally on the agenda. And I know that, there's an effort by councilperson Bruce Smith, to push this forward. And the last city council meeting was pretty, it looks like there's a real possibility that they might do something, at least make a statement, which would be better than nothing.
Yeah, I am planning to go to that, and I'm also trying to get as many students as I can to come. I will likely try and sign up to speak in comments. But I've also been talking to Ruth Smith, and she said that she would attend the walkout that I'm hosting, and that she'll be there, and I can talk to her more then too.
So why did you decide to do this?
Well, originally, I was looking at the kind of the state of the country about national politics and not local politics originally, and about, the like authoritarianism and like disregard for humanity that ICE has represented in communities like Minneapolis, but also in smaller communities across the country where ICE has been essentially terrorizing local communities everywhere. I read something from the New York Times a couple days ago about a small town outside of Hillsborough. I can't remember what it's called right now, but it's a town of 17,000, I think. It's smaller than Roseburg, and about how ICE was sent there. It kind of destroyed the local community. A lot of people were injured, and the budget of this pretty small community the police budget had to be increased just so that they could monitor and deal with ICE there. And for ICE supposedly being a peacekeeping organization or whatever. I just thought it was really shocking to me that like police had to get funding especially just to deal with ICE. And I think that that kind of thing in which ICE is meant to be protecting the people that it rep or the people that it is around, um, like the reality is not that, and the harm that it causes is really obvious, both in terms of like a humanitarian aspect, but also an economic aspect. And I think that in coming to smaller communities, there's a really big harm because there's not like major organizing like there was in Minneapolis, just because there's not that many people, and also the people in smaller communities tend to be more conservative. Not that everybody is, but I really wanted to lead a fight against that just preemptively because I know it's a lot easier to do it now than when they're already entrenched in our community.
Well, and Donovan, you bring up a really good point, which is, ICE has come to our communities and they've taken, leaders and friends and family. Read an article on KLCC the other day about a guy who's lived here for 40 plus years. He's one of the best wine growers in the Willamette Valley, but they deported him for, nothing. He's been living an upstanding, great life here forever. And, it's just, Zach and the rest of us have brought this up on the other show, which, also lends credence to your point, which is, ICE in Oregon, specifically Douglas County, it's not here to create, peace or love or harmony or what we would install what a government program should be, but it's more retribution from, the national, because we're a sanctuary state. We're peaceful to immigrants and things like that. So we're now on the back end of some reciprocating backhand.
Would I put a question
Um,
for you, Donovan,
yeah.
about like, are you getting a lot of support from other students in the student body, and what does that look like, and what does the support look like in Roseburg High School? I'd just be interested now.
Um, so a couple months ago, there was a after school protest over ICE that I didn't help organize. I attended it, but I wasn't really like super related to it. I'm not sure what kind of support they got from the student body. I know that there ended up being probably about 50 people who came out and protest of ICE. For me personally, this time around, I have had some help from the people who organized that one. Uh, but there isn't like a necessarily like a big student group helping me. A lot of individuals at the school have helped me organize things and make posters and that kind of thing and help get the word out to more students. But no, there isn't really like a organization or like a club or anything that is helping me like that.
That's interesting because I know, at least on the right, I've heard that Turning Point USA is coming all over. And I mean, have they? I know, I'm 24, so I've still got some family and friends who are in high school. But I'm asking, have Turning Point showed up in RHS yet?
Yeah, there's a club at RHS called Club America that is very closely affiliated with Turning Point USA. They don't have a ton of members, and I'm not sure if they've done any kind of actual political activism, but they're definitely there, and they're a little bit they're rather loud about some of their beliefs regarding ICE or Trump in general or politics in general.
Well, and that's something I noticed when I went to RHS too, is that of course we're in Douglas County. There's what you could be to expect from Red Douglas County, but there's also a very wide diaspora of people and feelings at RHS. So it just strikes me as something really surprising that it'd be so hate filled. You know what I mean? If it was, which it doesn't sound like it's entirely hate filled. You know what I mean? There's people there, but it's not like the entirety of RHS is like, no, screw this, because that's when we posted your stuff and a lot of these anti-ICE things on our social medias and trying to get traction for it, you'd be surprised of the negativity that comes out in our community just as baseborn. So it's really interesting to hear how the high school itself, our future, takes this. Because, when I went there, it was still kind of really muddled. You know what I mean? It was about 2018, So I had Bernie Sanders to lean on. So I still had some left leaning friends, but that didn't really mean much.
Yeah, and I mean I've definitely seen that firsthand. I go out on Indivisibles protests every weekend. I mean I'm not there literally every weekend, but I'm there pretty often. And I definitely see some of that negativity. It is nice to see some of that kind of change. I'm getting flipped off and like yelled at that kind of thing a lot less than I used to be. And I think that I was talking to some of the Indivisible leaders the other day, and they said that that's kind of a feeling that they share is that a lot of people are kind of coming around to to opposing Trump, or at least not so publicly and so brazenly supporting him and like yelling at anybody who doesn't. And I think that that's like a really positive development. I've seen that around the student body too. A lot of people who I think would have joined Club America, the Turning Point USA affiliate, a couple of years ago, even around the first Trump election and the second Trump election, probably, are a lot more hesitant about their politics now. They don't necessarily support Trump on a personal level as much anymore. They're definitely still conservatives, but they're not personally loyal to Trump in a way that a lot of Republicans definitely used to be and still are. But I think that kind of voter, that kind of person is a lot less common now than it was before.
Well, you're right. I mean, it's hard to defend some of the things that we see. I mean, especially when the promises and it's good to be on the attack instead of the defense. And that's one thing that I've despised about this current administration is they'll create the craziest things to make you feel like you have to defend yourself when it's like, no, I just want to make sure everybody lives happily and healthily and not hungry. And then apparently you're a socialist, gay, communist, and it's all this big deal. And it's like, no, I just care about people. And it's again, it goes back to that philosophical discussion that me and Betsy have had before, which is, at the end of the day, what is it, do you take care of me and mine only, or do you feel that it's your need to take care of the community as a whole? Zach, I actually wanted to bring you into this discussion too, because if I'm not mistaken, you also attended RHS when you were here at Roseburg, right?
That I did, a class of 2014, a bit earlier than you.
How was it at your time? Because I didn't graduate RHS. I was fortunate enough to go back to Glide, and I graduated 19. But still, I was, I saw firsthand in Roseburg that it wasn't too bad. So let's go back a little bit farther, and let's put this into context. And it's good to see that it's going in a more leftward perspective. Did you see that at your time too?
In my time, I recall it being somewhat of a mix. I was not that aware of where everyone stood. Um, but from those who I'm still in contact with or remember fondly, a good lot of folks who were antagonistic toward um, the deeply nationalistic sentiments and the rather reactionary sentiments that were prevalent among certain populations at the school did not stay in Roseburg or Douglas County for the most part. There are certainly exceptions to that, but some of those who I recall being the most socially politically conscious who um, who knew anything about, say, a political candidate who was running for office, at the very least, did not seem to stick around, um, which I think falls into the problem of what's often called brain drain, or the ejection of um, rather thoughtful people, of socially conscious people from small towns, from rural communities, due to not so much lack of opportunity, I would say, but animosity, and an anti-intellectual animosity. Um, it is very difficult, as some of you know, to live in a to live in a town, to live in any area that is hostile to cognizance, um, to moral sentiment that steers away from mere calculation and that defies what gets called traditionalism, despite that tradition being rather, or so-called tradition being rather fraught and not that old. Um, Not a welcoming environment. And this is, of course, I of course still see whenever I'm back in Douglas County, whenever I'm back in Roseburg, I like walking through the parks and under the bridges, and I still see under the I-5 bridge near Roseburg High School a large, now quite faded black sun, the old esoteric symbol of the SS, uh, the Nazi elite paramilitary organized by Heinrich Himmler. That symbol still exists there. And I don't think it should be removed necessarily. I think it's a fine reminder of Roseburg's long-standing history and the lingering sentiments of at least some of the student body at Roseburg High School that was present in my time. Um, Active um, racist sentiment, um, active um, inclination toward domination of other students. And when I was even a student in school, I recall even teachers were regularly harassed and um, uh, I, for lack of a better term, bullied, um, demeaned by um, by uh, certain students who were prone to getting in fights and also prone to harassing ethnic minorities around campus. And I can't tell you how many times uh, when I was at Roseburg High School between 2010 and 2014, and even when I was a much younger student going to Glide Elementary and Glide Middle School prior to 2010, the sheer number of times I would hear um, slurs against not just my few Black and Latino classmates, against my women classmates, but also against folks like myself, like against Jews. I, the word Jew was often used as a very frequent slur. Um, so certainly there's a what I would describe now, with my perspective, having studied US history to a much greater degree. This is a that long-term lingering effect and continued presence of quite old racial supremacist sentiment in our area. And there are still people who don't quite understand that this is derivative from the fact that Roseburg and Douglas County are old hotbeds of the Ku Klux Klan, among other white nationalist groups, some of which remained prominent and have been known even up through the 1980s, and some scattered remnants of it through the present day. Medford is a hotbed of that. Roseburg's been host to plenty of it. I mean, there are even uh, small fascistic groups that have been traced by journalistic outlets like Left Coast Right Watch in places like Jacksonville, of all places. Um, when I was a student at SOU, even. This was after 2014, so between 2014, 2015, uh, even in a supposedly liberal town, although which predominantly has Green Party leanings in recent history. Uh, there were a couple moments when there were active neo-Nazis known in town who were putting up flyers with swastikas and threats against Jews in Ashland. There was even somebody who ran for mayor who was like who had his name and information in the voter guide that was going on and on about international Jewish conspiracy. So even beyond Roseburg, Southern Oregon in general, even in places where we don't think it has um, strong roots, that that deep-seated authoritarianism, what we now call Christian nationalism, and a very deeply embedded white supremacism runs very strongly. And I think that at a place like Roseburg High School, which is the centerpiece of the youth life in Douglas County, at least as I knew it, I think it's a place that can very easily ebb and flow over the years. And I would expect that in the last in the last 10 years since I've been away, I would think that the rising of authoritarian movements globally would also bring it out in new force that wasn't so present in my time when Barack Obama was president, um, to be more forward-facing, outright, with students far less fearful of expressing deeply white supremacist sentiments.
So Donovan, do you see that, being different than what Zach just described?
Um, I think that Zach is mostly right that I definitely saw an increase in people being more comfortable being openly white supremacist and bigoted towards all sorts of minority groups, but especially racial. I think that in the last couple years, really the last year, as Trump's popularity has waned and as his movement has continuously lost support, especially among young people who voted him in as a populist, despite him not being a populist. Um, People feel less comfortable, I think, espousing his ideology. And I mean, I think that's a good thing. But I think going back to what Zach said about generally anti-intellectualism, I think that that's played a huge role. I have always been, since I've been in high school, in like all honors AP classes, but even in those like higher level classes, I have heard like the phrase "it's not that deep," referring to like literature or to government or to politics, to any wide range of fields, more times than I can count. And there's kind of like a very large sect of conservative students taking higher level courses that kind of view like maybe not consciously, but it feels like they view critical thinking as like for lack of a better word, is like woke or is like something that liberals do and they don't. And I don't think that that's like a conscious thing, but I think that that kind of influences a lot of political beliefs today. Um, a lot of my peers aren't super invested in politics, especially not local politics, and I don't think it's any surprise, but basically all the ones that are increasingly progressive, the more and more they understand the political and economic systems that they exist under. I was talking to a teacher the other day, and we kind of agreed that like it's not as bad this year, but in the past couple of years we've really been hit a couple times by the fact that, or like by Roseburg's history and Southern Oregon's history with white supremacy in general. Especially, I think the term we used specifically was that was the fact that Roseburg used to be a sundown town, and that kind of like white supremacist rhetoric definitely still exists. It certainly hasn't gone away in the past couple of years. Um, I do think I'm comfortable to say though that it is less common now, and I do think that that overall there has been an improvement in that regard.
And in regard to the protests of ICE, do your other students see it as the bigger picture of the authoritarianism, or what do you think their take is on why this is happening?
For students who I think are more engaged with politics, especially on a national level, for a lot of people it is the authoritarianism and the like parallels to 40s Germany and to the Italian fascist movement and that kind of era. But for a lot of people it is kind of more of a like me and my own kind of thing. And a lot of primarily like conservative white friend groups that exist around the school, there tends to be like a token minority kind of, whether that be a Latino person or a black person or an Asian person. And I think that like the rhetoric being espoused against ethnic minorities of all stripes has kind of turned a lot of younger people who may hold some of those beliefs, but also interact with people of racial and ethnic minorities. It's kind of, I think, radicalized them against ICE and against like like mass deportation ideology and like national conservatism movements in general.
Mhm.
Do they make the connection about voting and electoral politics? I mean, you said they don't locally, but do they is it become just a conversation, or do they actually vote? Do they, you know, get out and get politically in a campaign? Kevin was, schlepping for Bernie Sanders when he was what, 15?
Well, 2016 was a really interesting year. And I did want to bring that up, how you got involved later, but I am interested to know how they feel about because Betsy's right. When I went to school in 2016, honestly, that was the talk on the town. You couldn't get away from, although I was going to Glide at the time, you could not get away from the talk of the elections. You know what I mean? Even when we were so young. And I graduated 3 years later, so I was a sophomore when the actual elections came around. So it was completely different because I think it was like just like your thing. It's almost like a status thing to appear more intellectual or anything to see like they had the upper hand. But honestly, it was just more hemming and hawing about conservatism and just like we're talking about the me and mine compared to the community as a whole, which is just a lackluster lack of thought, you know, intuitive thinking.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, they haven't really been super invested in electoral politics in general. Chiefly because like anybody at the high school right now is turning 18 right now. That this is going to be the first the midterms are going to be the first elections they can vote in. I myself am just a few weeks too young to be able to vote in the primary for the House race. And I think for a lot of people, it's just not something that they've ever really had to or like been able to think about because there's nothing that they felt that they could do about it. I mean, obviously, like you can go organize and campaign regardless of your age, but I think for a lot of people, it's not something that they have really been forced to reckon with, and so they haven't really thought about electoralism in that way. I think as people get older, I think among the people I talk to, they are, I think, invested in electoralism, but a lot less so than I think a lot of people would expect, even among more progressive-minded people that I know, and especially among like classical liberals. Um, they aren't necessarily super invested in like voting and doing electoral politics because I don't think as like an age group we've ever really seen the systems that America has founded on work for us. I mean, college is prohibitively expensive. No one owns a home. Nobody can pay rent, and everybody's broke, especially in a community like Roseburg is in Douglas County, where our wages are incredibly low in terms of actual buying power and stuff. Um, Especially with an economy so reliant on timber, there's not like a huge like avenue for upward mobility in Roseburg. I think for a lot of people, because they have never seen the economic system work for them, they're not really super invested in the systems that uphold it and that they can affect regarding politics.
Well, and I think that's why, I mean, even in my time, why there was such a groundswell for Bernie Sanders, even in 2016, even when we were young, because it did challenge the established systems that we know it, especially the political systems. Because, the whole reason I think, I don't want to speak out of turn, but my theory on why 2016 was a little bit more hotbed than anything else is because it was the last time anything was new. The Democrats keep rolling out the same liberal agendas since 2016, but it was the last time we saw some actual significant change, that could have happened. And instead, we're left with Trump for the last up going on 6 years. Regardless what you say, he's left an impact even when he didn't win in 2020. So it's this continuation of the same bullshit and the same fight we've been see from 2016, and nobody wants to participate because again, it's just a longer issuance of the system doesn't work, the economy doesn't work. It's hard to support a family here in Douglas County when the one industry they try and champion is falling ground like quicksand underneath our feet.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people originally were like, especially when uh, uh, let me rephrase. I think a lot of people my age were politically unengaged enough that they were really swept in by Trump's populist rhetoric because they saw it as like a challenge to politics. Even in 2020, I know a lot of my peers were really invested in Trump and about his ideology in general, because they hadn't really been invested and knowledgeable about politics and like what he did during his first term, and they still saw him as like a populist pick to change the systems that really they had never seen benefit them or anybody that they knew. And I think that now, as Trump is kind of losing some of his populist credentials, I think that a lot of them are kind of waning on the support of him. But I think especially because national Democrats have been so slow to adopt any sort of populist or progressive rhetoric at all, a lot of them are kind of turned off from electoralism in general, especially because there is no like high profile populist candidates in Oregon really, or representatives or senators or anything. At least not that like people who aren't invested in politics know a lot about. They're not really invested in their local politics or their national politics because they don't really see that there is anyone to like really shake up the systems that they criticize.
Well, and I do want to talk about more about, organizing young people and ourselves, but I do think we need to at least do the due diligence of talking about why we came up on here, which is, you are doing such a fantastic job. You're organizing, you're being a leader in a community, stuff that I couldn't have done at your age. I was just knocking doors. I'm a soldier. But was saying that, what's some of the stuff here that at SOPP we can do for you? I know we're showing some of your social medias and we're doing some things like that. But we've offered this help to other people in the past. So what could we do to help you? Help you make posters, get the word out, even organize some of these events. Because just like you heard at the beginning, we've got some experience that we would love to give with you. Because the courthouse doesn't need a permit. You only need one for what is it? Noise making machines over so many decibels. But there's stuff that we would love to help you out. And so let's start that conversation.
What I meant about the courthouse specifically was that after I had posted it while I was still in the process of getting the audio permits, apparently there was a different group who, before I finished submitting everything, filed permits to have a pro-ICE demonstration at the courthouse at the same time. And so I, I either have to move it or compete with them for airtime, and with and with there hopefully being a bunch of underclassmen, high schoolers, freshmen and sophomores, who I would like to come as well. It it seems a lot easier for me to just do it next to the high school anyway if there's going to be like competition there because I don't know how many of them could actually like walk across town without parents being there, and I don't know how parents would feel about that. But I think in general, um, for this one, I would love to make physical posters, and I think that that would be great, and I can talk to you guys about that maybe off the podcast. But I think with just organizing for this one, I think that mostly at this point, I just need to get the word out, especially with location changing. I think that it really it's going to be an uphill battle a little just to make sure everybody's aware of that change. Um, just moving things can really make a like confuse a lot of people, and hopefully we can make sure that they know where to go and when and stuff.
Jane,
No, I just had a couple questions. I mean, like, does the school will they allow students to like use their system of like email and to communicate to the students on this message? And but what I find sad is just like what Zach was talking about. Like, this is a perfect time to educate our youth on the racism that exists, the real history. And I think that's what's like, how do we, because like, as you said, the culture has somewhat changed in the high school a little bit. Like, why not have the high school leadership lead a conversation and talk about the history, talk about what's happening in our world, kind of like a debate type thing that's like monitored, but like to have an open, honest discussion of the real racism of Douglas County. Because, you know, I just think that's what's lost in our world is that we don't talk about these things. We don't educate our youth so that they truly understand the deeper history and the negative aspects of that. But I just wondered, like, what kind of school support, or if there's no school support, which I wouldn't find. I mean, some schools are really good, like South Umpqua, man. I think their leadership is much more engaged with like the students because they were one of the first ones that had the health fairs. Reedsport, they were really nervous, but they had the health fairs and they actually saw a positive impact on the students. You know, Sutherland, same thing, but we have never been able to get into Roseburg. And, it's a little bigger and it's a different dynamic for us, but I kind of judge a school by that. And Reedsport, they were very nervous, met with us several times, and laid out some parameters, and we stood by those. But the students enjoyed it. They saw the impact on the students, and we could do. It seems like it'll be really cool to do something along what's happening in our nation to really truly educate youth on the history of how we got here. Because I know growing up, there wasn't this division and in my high school, and we did some cool things. Like we had mock elections and things like that, and it was a lot of fun. It was very rural, and very redneck area, but it was very democratic at that time. Now it's very Republican. It's similar, so similar to Douglas County. But I had lots of thoughts going through my mind.
Um, I have not asked the school for help. I think that they would probably be unwilling. Part of the reason I say that is because last year we had I won't name names, but a pretty high profile member of student government like get investigated by the school because he and a bunch of his friends and a couple people like kind of associated with student leadership were on a Google Doc talking about like anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and like memes regarding like Hitler and fascism in general, and just some like really like vile racist stuff. And admin just like I mean there was a little bit of punishment given out, but for the most part it was kind of just swept under the rug. And I haven't really uh, nobody that I know has really ever gone to admin after that with anything even remotely progressive because I think that after that I think admin lost the trust of a lot of students. So
Mhm. Well, beyond these examples of things like mock elections or mock debates and such, a school is a real part of the world, and you can organize political bodies within even a school setting. Even universities do it. Universities have student governments and student organizations that do serious work, that do organize to, to work as a block, as a unit that can function in, a new kind of politics within the school, even that stands as an alternative, or even you know, that uh, makes that could do away with the if any kind of seriousness of, if there is any, of a so-called student government that presently exists. But also something like a student committee or a student council, a political organization, could send something like a delegate to the city council as a representative of something like, the students commission, not unlike what some folks in this call are doing with the People's Homeless Commission. You can take those matters into your own hands and make demands, and that can go beyond just organizing protests with continuous bodies, more than just a scattering of individuals. If you have organized groups that can vote on decision making that has real consequences, in whether it's the school or broader in the city, um, I think you could create something totally new for the city of Roseburg, coming out of Roseburg High School, that has never been done before. I think that you're living in a moment that's quite a bit different than mine. I would think there's some more overlap with Kevin's time, considering the Bernie Sanders phenomenon in 2016. But you are, for lack of a better term, coming of age in a time when the conditions are ripe for you to be learning about the world in a way that those, say, of my generation, as when I was a senior in high school, were not really possible for us. There were not the same kinds of apparent crises or technological developments, of deep social strife that had erupted, maybe bubbling at the surface, but hadn't erupted in the same kind of ways that you are now experiencing. You're in a very unique historical position, and I would suggest seizing that. There's an opportunity there for organizing your fellow students in a way that would not have been possible 10 years ago.
If I'm not mistaken, there used to be a both a Young Republican and Young Democratic club at RHS that obviously didn't fill the same role that you're describing, but I'm not sure why it stopped existing to begin with. This year, a couple of my friends and I got into contact with some Democratic Socialists of America representatives, and we tried to start a YDSA club at the school. Unfortunately, our the reps we talked to at DSA never really got back to us. But I would definitely be interested in like founding. After that, we kind of it kind of fizzled out. But I would definitely be interested in starting like a student commission kind of thing. I know that I have some friends who are engaged with like student leadership who do frequently go to city council and present like reports on the school and like issues regarding the student body in general and stuff.
Well, and I think what Zach is talking about can be a little bit bigger because, in this room, we've got some really powerful people and some really great thinkers like Betsy, John Hunter, Dane Zahner. Even Max here is running for city council and is a great thinker along with the rest of them. And I think it's a great time for something bigger because right now we were talking about not only the homeless commission, but the electoral life of leftists in Douglas County in general. Because, what we try to do is we try to organize the bigger picture because right now we are doing stuff like a home rule charter. We're trying to help our candidates in Congress win the electoral seat. We're trying to, depose Tina Kotek because she's done some very non-progressive things. And we're also trying to make sure our ideology is not dead and dying in this area. When me and Betsy talk a lot, like the old women that we are, and we give and we gob, and and how it's changed from when Betsy first moved here till today. It's not necessarily been a groundswell, but it's also not necessarily died. And that's why we're doing these things, is because we want to see these things grow and we want to see these things come to fruition. That's the whole reason I got involved in politics in the first place, is because we know what our home is like, but we also know what we are like and our moral philosophies, and that they don't completely match up to where we live. So we want to change things about that. And that also leads to my next couple of questions, which, kind of go away from necessarily the student organizing thing you're doing at Roseburg, which again, amazing. And we were going to get this things out, and please send us anything in that email thread that you might need help with. Max, I saw you were unmuted. Did you want to say something? Because I know you've got frog leg, and I know that smile when you said posters. I saw that smile on your face.
Yeah, I did wanted to introduce myself. I didn't really get to unmute earlier. My name's Max. I'm from Roseburg. Lived here most of my life. I did want to just mention too, like I graduated high school at RHS in 2003, and I just remember that was like right after 9/11, and then like I don't know, a lot everybody I was associated with was like feeling that same very disenfranchised, like I don't nothing none of this applies to us, kind of we're just skater kids, fuck all this bullshit, and I feel like a lot of my old friends didn't have that kind of intellectual bent that I kind of had from kind of my mother's teachings or whatever, and she kind of led me into this like more thinking actual thing that seems to be very much like there's a big push to get rid of all this thinking and smartness and intellectual talking. So we want to just, it's like all the better to bring, debate clubs and stuff inspired by whoever, even if it's Charlie Kirk or whatever. But like they're all very anti-intellectual. So it's like we should be inviting the dialogue and actually like but like they kind of block it. And so that's what I noticed with the everything. But the only protest I remember, that was back when people were like wearing long jackets, like school shooters were just starting to happen or whatever, and that was a scary thing. But and then there was also one year, I think right before I graduated, was like there was somebody that got famous on the internet for having a bong hits for Jesus sign that they were protesting outside the high school. So I just want to throw that there as my high school. But also I have this studio downtown, Frog Leg Studio, kind of just building it into like an art co-op kind of thing, and or some kind of a community resource center. And you're welcome to make copies anytime. I already made a few copies of your thing, among other things that I needed to copy off, and putting out more literature and stuff these days. And so I'm excited to see something going on at the high school. That's kind of way more than I ever thought would happen, at least from my experience with it.
Tina, your hand's up. You're muted though, I think.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just quick introduction. I'm Tina Dadowski. I do Umpqua Valley Pride, but also relevant to this, I wanted to follow up with Max and offering services. I do security and safety, and if any of y'all just need know your rights training or anything to help with that sort of aspect, every other week there's a group of us that meet, and we did pride security in that. So we're also going to be there and of course follow your lead if there's anything y'all need, or if any of you concerned with what your rights are and what you can and can't do. I have resources I can reach out to. And also, I wanted to thank you very much for stepping up and being in community and doing this. This is inspirational. Thank you, Donovan.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I'll message you after this and get in contact about some stuff that could help. Just thank you so much for that. Both you and or both of you. And actually not just you, but everybody here who's been engaged in helping, whether that be spreading the word or like helping me organize stuff in general.
Well, that's what we're here for, is we're all trying to bolster a leftist community in the area, and that comes with, collaboration, community support, and sharing of resources. And that's what we're all here for. And does anybody else have any more questions? Because we are down to the wire. But I did want to ask Donovan, I got involved in 2016 too because of Bernie Sanders. It was kind of, besides I believed in his premise, income inequality, healthcare for all, and free education. um, it was also a really convenient excuse to get away from high school. So what was your, what got you involved in 2016? And that also leads to my next question, which is, we see our community, and I made a conscious choice a very long time ago that instead of be one of the brain drain, I said, you know what, I would like to stay here and organize my community. And I just wanted to know your thoughts about your future if I'm not pressing too far.
Yeah, for sure. In 2016, I was 8 or 9 years old. I didn't have super developed political thoughts about policy, but I think some of the rhetoric that Trump espoused in 2016 was really shocking to me and really kind of I, this term is kind of overused, but radicalized me in a way. And I think that after the 2016 election, I was always kind of engaged in anti-fascist ideology, whether that be through like local progressive movements or like national further left movements. But I don't know. It's hard for me to really put a finger on what it was specifically. I was kind of too young to oppose Trump on individual policies, but I really do think it was just kind of the like like the kind of insane amount of racist and especially Islamophobic rhetoric at the time.
You don't have to. I mean, to be completely fair, I was not a good kid in high school. So let me just say my cognitive abilities were dependent on what time and how much I smoked that day. But with saying that, I totally get you that you don't have to have a conceived thought to, it's again like that philosophical thing we were talking about of you take care of your own or the community, and you don't have to have bigger thoughts to say, hey, that guy's hateful and you're a fucking dick.
Yeah. For my future, I'm not really certain. In a couple months, I am going to the University of Washington in Seattle for my bachelor's. I've already completed about 2 years, and I'm majoring in political science. After that, I'm not entirely sure. I might come back here for a bit, to Southern Oregon. I could end up staying here. I'm not really sure. I've always kind of wanted to be in a more progressive community. But I've always kind of dealt with the thought that places around the country, like smaller communities like the one that I grew up in, aren't going to get better if people don't stay and if people don't make them better. And and so it's really been a difficult decision for me for a long time about whether or not I would come back or I would go. And I think at this point I'm still not entirely sure. I think I'll kind of have to see after I've lived in Seattle for a bit.
Well, and if it's any consolation, my friends have not to speak out of turn, but you're not the only one who's felt that way. It's very lonely here, and it's very. But I again, I perceive. Zach, do you want to say something? Because I get it.
Yeah, I could say something very similar, Donovan. I left Oregon and I thought I was going to be away for good until 2020, and I came back. I went all the way out to North Carolina, came back, moved all the way down to Los Angeles, was there for a few years, and came back. And similarly, I was of a mentality like yours that everywhere is a place where a fight has to be had. And being from a place like where you are now in Douglas County in Roseburg, there is um there is a unique opportunity that you have as a um, as a person with heightened consciousness, especially at the age that you're at already. With, of course, many, many years of learning ahead of you and a political science education to undertake, etc. But if you know that you have a certain um, knowledge set, a certain skill set that is desperately needed in a place where you have a great familiarity with, it's needed because ultimately, I've found that uh, the fight has to take place in the small towns. Small towns like Roseburg have potentials that, a bigger liberal or progressive city, or even little socialist cities like Burlington, Vermont, or like Portland, Oregon, don't have. You can be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. And in some ways, it's easier to organize masses of people, to develop a neighborly familiarity with the people in your town, in your broader community, and to be an effective educator, to have a strong presence. And also on a more material level, Roseburg, Douglas County are important in the functioning of, uh, for lack of a better term, the U.S. empire. Our role as a centerpiece historically of the timber industry, for one thing, is what propped up what Eisenhower once called the military-industrial complex. And it takes fights directly with our city councilors, with the county commissions, and the creation of new kinds of politics in these areas by those who know that it is possible, like yourself. Um, that kind of fighting directly in these places is of the utmost necessity, for to go off of Kevin's line about leftism. More importantly than using that rather abstract term, the idea of the left, of course, goes back to the French Revolution. Those who were opposed to the reestablishment of a monarchy, who stood behind the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity, who wanted not just, peace and prosperity in Paris or in France, but in the whole world, universally. The goal is always in every single place, in every small town, in every rural community, in every city, in every country, to establish a real harmonious society for humankind that flourishes, that benefits everybody, that is ecologically healthy and harmonious, that leaves nobody in misery, that is able to feed everybody and house everybody and care for everybody. New forms of relations like that need to be done everywhere. So I would encourage you to think seriously about, if it's not just straight coming back, at least coming back to Oregon, because little states like ours have a lot of quite revolutionary possibility that can be realized if we decide to fight here.
Don,
John,
you had your hand up?
Yeah. A couple of things. I was wondering, are you going to be speaking at the Indivisible rally this Saturday at the courthouse?
That's the one on the 25th, right?
Yes.
Yeah, me and one of my friends, also a high school senior, are both going to be giving speeches at that.
Okay, good. One thing that goes back to my generation, probably the youth, especially the high school youth, should start really becoming aware of is Trump's desire to reactivate the draft. And I think that's a point that can't be overstressed enough with them. It's uh, it has it could have a major impact upon their life, and any awareness that can be generated on that would, I think, would be important, because it impacted my my life for 7 years, and it's something everybody's taken for granted since about 1973. But if the Christian nationalists get their way, it's going to impact all the youth. So anyway, I just want to mention that.
Well, and Larry asked, what are the pros and cons of inviting K through 12 to participate in political issues? Are we stealing their youth? I'm going to give an answer. I am what some people even called a red diaper baby. Google it. My parents were political activists and there were political conversations. So did it steal my youth? I don't know, but I'm glad I was raised in the household I was, even after doing this for all these decades. So that's the bad news. Donovan, as you might be doing this for decades. The good news is I think that Zach is right. I think this is a political opportunity that has not existed except one other time in my lifetime, and I'm 70. So, this is an opportunity. This, it can change dramatically for the better. Even and some of the things you say about people's mind changing already, even at the high school level, understanding the problem with someone like Trump.
Mhm.
So do you think let Donovan answer Larry's question about do you think inviting the young people to get involved? I understand as a parent the concern about making kids grow up too much and too fast. The world is going to be a tough place when they get 18. But Donovan, what do you think? And then Zach.
Well, I think that we don't really have a choice. Our this sounds a little sensationalist, but I think it is true that our childhood has already been taken. Our youth has been taken by politics already. Every day online, I use this term very intentionally. For years now, every time I've logged into social media, I have seen a second version of the Holocaust live streamed. I have seen like death and destruction both in my own community and across the world. And I think that I understand from a parent's perspective that it really does suck that children don't really get a youth anymore, but I think being involved is the only way that you can deal with it, because my youth and the youth of everybody around me has been taken by whether it be politics, by economic circumstances, by genocide has been taken already. We have to be involved with it, and if we're not, it is like I mean you can't not be. It's everywhere. It's on social media. It's online. It's always in the back of your head.
Yeah, and Zach, I lied. I'm going to say something because you just made me think of something, Donovan, that even in my generation, what was stolen is our failure to pay attention to the world around us. And we let this happen. So we were deluded in our youth as well. It was stolen in a different way. And it helped steal your future. That's the real unfortunate part. Anyway, so much for my soapbox. There you go,
and
Zach.
and well, and I was just going to piggyback on you guys. It's like we're forced to be this because we're in an ecological catastrophe. We are living in a time where the scientists are saying the polar ice caps are going to melt, and everything that is going to be burning and hellish is going to be coming in our lifetime. So there's no other option. You can organize or you can die. Is my other philosophy. Sorry, Zach.
That's a t-shirt, Max. That's a t-shirt. Organize or die. Zach.
Well, it's hard to follow. It's hard to follow up with too much more than what Donovan's already said. You took the words right out of my mouth. Like, if there is anything that could be called childhood, it's already been taken. Yeah, to Donovan's point, you wake up every day and you see footage of genocide unfolding, not just in Gaza, but in other parts of the world at this point. And the president, oh my God, why am I calling him that? Um, has called openly for genocide of people in Iran at this point, basically, explicitly. But I kind of want to touch on something that Max brought up from his time in high school, the fear of school shooters. This school, a high school, and I could say the same thing for a university as well. And we know very well at Umpqua Community College that schools are places of threat at this point. Um, and for students to be passive and ignorant about the basic dangers that they face, even in their immediate sphere, is very much a thing of the past. I think it is also a very strange historical development of the 20th century, really the mid to late 20th century, that we think of this thing called childhood or youth as a time of innocence or purity that shouldn't be spoiled, because historically, the young people, even like a 5-year-old, 150 years ago, may often be found as a laborer working in factories, doing very specific tasks that only a child's hands can accomplish. Um, Young people have been exploited and dominated for a very long time. And the form of domination that has been most prevalent in the United States, I mean, straight up abuse aside, is the demoralizing and desocializing and depoliticizing too of young people, of those who we now call teenagers, of even young kids. You could find somebody to, Betsy talks about being a red diaper baby. You can find in a city like New York in the 1930s, youngsters aged like 7 who are reading about the French Revolution or something of that sort and are becoming politically conscious at very early ages because their families and they are of the understanding that it is necessary to be a conscious human being and to develop that, as soon as you can. It is part of the development of what Aristotle once called the political animal, which we are. The thing that makes us distinct as a species is that we have societies, we have politics, and the way that we become human truly in that view is to engage with the world through these forms, to become a politicized, to become a socialized, full human being. So, if anything, if now is also a unique historical moment, it's also a unique historical moment when young people at Roseburg High School even have an opportunity uh, to develop a humanity that was not present in these spaces in past decades, especially in the 20th century. A new kind of consciousness that can transform a community like Roseburg, could transform, the entirety of Oregon if done right. It's to be cultivated.
Donovan.
Yeah, there's a couple things I wanted to respond to. I'll go in order. First is that I I I know that I'm not the only one who has had to think about this because I've talked to a lot of other people who have shared my feelings during a football game or every time there's a fire drill or really anytime anything has ever happened. I know I'm not the only one who has spent time scanning out potential locations that a shooter could be, knowing where to go if that happens and what I would do, not in terms of like for a drill that the school is preparing, but in the specific scenario where I am right now, where would I go if that happens? And that's something that a lot of people I know have to be super cognizant of now. Um, and again, like it's like to say that we've lost our childhood because of engaging with politics in that way. I think well, I understand why somebody would think that. I think that it kind of misses the mark today because I mean, that kind of thing is something that we have to deal with on a daily basis. I also know that the majority of at least seniors, and I know a lot of juniors at this point, already hold jobs, already work 30 plus hours a week. I mean, some of them because they have to, some of them because college is so expensive that they'd be in lifelong debt if they didn't, and they probably still will be. And really, like young people have had to interact with the world as it is, both politically, economically, and socially at increasingly young ages because of an ailing political and economic model, but also because of an increase in things like school shootings and things like that. Not that those are unrelated from the political model of the country, but
Yeah, not to mention, of course, ecological crisis that is presently placing all of Oregon in very rough conditions come summertime. I'm sure everyone has, at this point, understood that we did not get the snowpack that we needed this winter.
Well, and I can speak a little bit more to that because I've just been getting ready for my fire stuff this year, and I have to go do all my refresher things. And there's absolutely zero snowpack out here. Even the snowstorms and the snows we've been getting in the last couple of weeks will make absolutely no difference. If anything, it's just going to increase the greenery. It's going to be one hell of a year, one hell of a year. And it's just another example because when I graduated, the year after was Archie Creek fire, and I was living out at Glide still at the time, so I had animals. We were evacuating family. I mean, it's it's just another microcosm of what is the bigger picture going to be here 30, 40 years down the line. Not even that far, personally, I don't think, because right now it's just it's being it's worse all the time, and there's no way to solve it unless there's just a complete revolutionary, like Chuck Willer was saying. We were talking. I haven't talked to him in a while, but last time I talked to him, he was advocating for an entire ban on logging because just the carbon being espoused and the release. It's right now we're at a time that we're at the precipice. We've already have 2 feet over.
So, anybody else want to say anything on this, about this topic? What
We
is the
need
topic?
more education from what Donovan said. Like, if you're going to have a drill, explain to the students why you're having the drill and the necessity. I just think as a society, we don't address the education piece enough. Like, being honest with kids, we're doing this drill because this is the reason. And, we want you, I don't know, without fear. I know you don't want to bring back the dare days. They don't work, and that terrorize them with fear is not but explaining why you're doing a drill and the necessity for that drill so that kids understand it. But I can't imagine. We didn't think about those things.
yeah,
We
real
did
quick.
tornadoes, but they explained why we were doing the tornado drill back in that day and how to protect yourself if a tornado hit. But we had a whole education piece around why we were doing this drill.
Yeah, real quick, I wanted to respond like verbally to what you asked. You asked if they address the fact that that school shooting is so common in schools and like the potential of that kind of threat. I said that we do drills, but we kind of treat them like we do fire drills or earthquake drills. It's kind of just seen as a fact of life. It's not something that can be changed. It's only something that can be responded to. And I think for a lot of people that's kind of how they see not only like school shootings, but also like general issues with society, like whether that be environmental and ecological challenges, whether that be economic shortcomings of the system we live in, the political systems and the corruption that exist. A lot of younger people, especially because they've never seen these systems or the environment or anything like that work, don't really see there be as being any options for change. Every ill of society is just something to be dealt with and responded to, not changed in the eyes of a lot of people. And I think that's part of why a lot of younger people don't really feel passionate about electoral politics.
I mean, Donovan, you're intuiting one of the basic premises of social ecology as well, which is understanding that politics, so-called as it currently exists, and the way that most of us think about even everyday life, not to mention the larger systems that we are entangled with, we approach these in terms of adaptation, uh, like uh, like a passive recipient of the conditions that we live in, right? We are not agents that participate in and shape the world. We are just shaped by the world. It dominates us, and we have to adjust ourselves into ever smaller little boxes in order to survive. Of course, simplifying and reducing ourselves all along the way. But I think what you're putting forward, similarly, is the need for agential understanding of our place in the world. Like de facto, by existing in the world, by living in the world, we shape it, even if we don't fully realize that we're doing that. And it's upon us to recognize that we do shape it, and we can shape it, and we can consciously shape it to suit our needs and desires. Um,
Well, we've been carefully taught not to have self-efficacy, right? They tout freedom, but there's really no mechanism where anybody can actually exercise freedom or individual choice. This is a way you're molded. Even, in dealing with homelessness, one of the big problems that I am concerned with is this, fatalistic belief about their lot in life, right? That actually enslaves you more. The more that you buy into it, that somebody else is doing shit to you and you can't do anything about it. That mentality has to change for society to change. And it used to be that way. We have historic examples of how that happened.
right.
Right? So it's everywhere. I think that people don't feel empowered. It's a lot of, their experience. And I hate to say this, having lived half of my life in the LA area as a political activist, and the other half, latter half here, there is a really different mindset about that. The inroad into that, I have some power, is stronger in the areas when I lived there, at least in the 80s in the LA area before. And so, because I did organizing in ghettos, I did organizing of homeless people, and it was a lot easier back then for people to get that. Not only am I entitled to be treated decently here, and then make that connection. Well, wait a second, here are the other things, and that's the inroad I think we have to convince people of. It's one of the focuses that Housing First Umpqua does regarding the outreach to the folks who are living outside, is teach them how to exercise their rights, for example. That's a main focus of what we try to get people to exercise their rights. And we also are part of the People's Homeless Commission, where, one of the things, and that's going to be a challenge, is to make sure that there's enough people who are actually with lived experience, particularly current, or at that table too, because when everybody else makes decisions for you, it doesn't usually work out the way it should.
Well, of course, too, it's never just a matter of convincing, right? We need these political
That's true.
bodies to empower people. Empowerment is not just a mindset change.
Or an
It is
invitation, right?
yeah, or an invitation. It comes through
Yeah.
being together in these in these political bodies, in social organizations where we can deliberate, discuss, where people can express their basic needs and desires, what they want to in their community, what they need for themselves. This is how mutual aid becomes possible. This is how the establishment of new kinds of social institutions becomes possible. This is how we take care of each other. This is how we learn to take care of each other and build the forms through which we can take care of each other. Um, so always, politics is the answer, but it's not necessarily electoral politics. Popular politics is the answer that involves people directly, that brings real neighbors together in communion, in a certain sense, in unity, in harmony, in conversation, and hashing things out. That's how we build a better community. That's how we build one we can actually live in, and that can be sustained for not just future generations, but can redeem those who were wronged before us.
Anybody else?
I'm preaching now.
I was
All
gonna
right.
say, as
So,
a parent, involving my child with, my thinking and stuff has always been kind of a challenge, in this stuff. But yeah, like I agree that it's a very personal thing, the politics of, being around each other and listening to each other, advocating for, my child and stuff, and his needs and stuff. And on a bigger level, like, yeah, you can't really shelter your kid from what's going on. Like, so you might as well just find a way to explain it in a way. And, from age 3 or whatever, that's when they say, I really think about that when people try to explain things and they forget to think about it and stuff. Like, if you can't explain to a 3-year-old, it doesn't make sense, and have them understand it. It just probably doesn't make sense. And that's kind of a thing I kind of try to live by, because a lot of people get it all complicated and you're like, what the fuck? None of this makes sense. Let's stop and really see what we're talking about. So I think that's where I try to come in with the, you know, organizing and stuff, and just kind of keep things real simple. Cause yeah, it's a hard thing with this whole, there's a whole political body trying to like end wokeness or whatever, and like stop the woke. And it's like, what the fuck? That means like stop thinking. So do you guys understand how that's a problem? So anyway, that's just what I was thinking about.
yeah, I always love the woke because I'd said, well, the opposite of woke is you're asleep. I'm not sure you should want that as your moniker. Um, but Larry pointed out that in the 50s we had climbed under our desk and watched for the bright flashes on, of the atomic bombs from Russia. Both we had the bombs and still we're here, right? Still here, just another experience that makes us who we are. And I think that's true. And I think it really kind of illustrates the whole point is you really can't avoid what happens in your time, period. Right. That this idea that children had any luxury at all is a more recent invention of history. Okay. So, it started with my generation of children. We had much more luxurious childhoods if we were white, working middle class. And I just want to say that periodically, that was better in our times, and I think Dana alluded to that. It is from the perspective of now, but I'm going to tell you my favorite Langston Hughes poem. America was never America for me, and it really, really cuts to the reality that America's never been great for everyone in America ever. So we haven't even reached that ability to say that we've lost something dramatically. So anybody else want to say something? Anybody else want to say something about this particular topic, whatever we've gone to? Or do they have some other announcement or exciting news?
Donovan is an extremely intelligent, bright, enthusiastic, articulate individual that represents not only youth but America quite well.
Thank you.
Ditto. Yep.
Only,
Some of these younger guys in the room always give me some hope for the future already, but you're even younger still, right on, you know, the planet and humans may survive.
the only other thing I have is remember that the place has changed. I'll get out new posters and flyers and stuff. Uh, be there on the 27th at 2 p.m. across the street from the high school.
Yeah, I got a copy machine too, so don't go buying copies from Staples or if you don't, you know.
So anybody else have any other topic they want to mention?
Yes, I just wanted to get your opinion about last Wednesday at the Board of Commissioners meeting. They decided to bring up the topic about homelessness in Roseburg, and they were very, of course, they jumped on the bandwagon to be critical of the city of Roseburg. And Crest was talking about, as a resident of Roseburg, that he's quite upset with the city council not doing anything. I thought it was a lot of political grandstanding by the commissioners, but I was just wondering what some of the others of you thought about it.
My only thoughts on that are, what does it surprise you again? You know what I mean? Like, this is something that we've seen time and time again from them. And I know, gosh, it's just when we talk about the current county commissioners, it makes me so irate and depressed at the same time, because it's we've been fighting against these same systems for forever. And just to kind of bring Donovan up for it, we've been really campaigning for a bunch of county commissioner candidates too that we're hoping to support and knock these three off the aisle. So hopefully you can help us out with that too.
Well, you could read my comments on the news review, and actually Pat Moore reached out to me and he said he liked my letter as if it was a letter to the editor because it was quite long. But and I basically brought up the People's Homeless Commission and the fact that, what Tom Kress said, he lives here and he doesn't like it. And I said he's not the only one who doesn't like it, right? So their criticism or concerned about the city of Roseburg not doing anything is probably accurate, right? That's a pretty common, that is why the People's Homeless Commission started. It's why we called it the People's Homeless Commission, because it's counter to Roseburg Homeless Commission, right? It really is that challenge, to the institutional government. But the solutions have always been there. I mean, the thing that annoys me anytime any politician talks about homelessness is the solutions that Housing for Some and others say today are solutions that were there 20, 30 years ago. Swear to God. Okay. And the avoidance of homelessness was there. And we started to dismantle the public housing system under Ronald Reagan in the 80s. And that's when modern day homelessness started to rise dramatically. And so, the problem is really there. I always say this, there's ways, we don't have the will. And hopefully that Citizens Assembly, the People's Homeless Commission, will start bringing in stuff that is, push, the idea that you have to make things that actually can be documented, they're effective. They have to be humane. They have to be just, and we needed to set a parameter for them to behave in. And that's where I think that Parallel Actions Act talks about all the time, is you just keep running with them. And quite frankly, they'll get out of the way. That's my belief at some point. They'll be forced out of the way if nothing else. Donovan, did you want to say something with your hands up?
Yeah, I just realized again that I hadn't announced this, but Nick Mitchell, Shane Kelly, and possibly Lori Wick, she said she would if she's in town, are coming and speaking at the protest I'm holding, as well as Dr. Melissa Bird, the primary candidate for the House. And Max, I was also wondering if you were interested, if you would like to come and give a speech.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you.
Yeah,
Is that the
I will.
27th?
27th. I'll send you the
Yeah.
details and after this.
Cool, thanks.
Max for Roseburg.
Yeah, anything I can do to, reinforce this and kind of just weave in the fabric of like the people's voice of consensus that we need to actually like work on. Um, that sounds like a great idea. Thank you.
Well, since I know we're wrapping things up here, Donovan, but to put your head in future consideration while you're still doing your protests and while you're still in the area, one thing that here at the SOPP we've been championing, besides just the county commissioners things and the homeless commission, is we've thought about doing campaign um, home rule charter in Douglas County. So keep your eyes open, and we'd love your help on stuff like that because we're the future. We want to solidify things like the People's Homeless Commission, campaign finance reform, and term limits here. And, that's a way we can do it and get more direct, actionable democracy here locally.
One thing I want to mention about the People's Homeless Commission that I didn't is tomorrow night, and people may not see this before tomorrow night, but hopefully we will have it recorded. Wayne Ellsworth and hopefully Dane is going to be there. They're both on the board of Umpqua Heart, which is a nonprofit that started within the last 5 years. And Wayne specifically was instrumental, really, I think, in getting support services and really start to make Hastings Village, which is in the city of Sutherland, get what it needs. Some things went wrong, and you'll hear about them at the People's Homeless Commission, because looking at what went wrong, and the city still has it, it's just not what it should be. And we'll cover that maybe in a future SOPP. We'll take a look at Hastings Village as well. But it is at least an example of where a city could put up a place for people to be. And I don't like to call it camping because these aren't campgrounds. People are living there. I hate the term camping in regard to people living outside, and they need places to be, period. It's not giving them, and anybody, I hear some people say, well, actually, even at the last city council, the only person who didn't talk about ICE, said he doesn't think we should call homeless people campers. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? He goes, well, they're not campers. We don't know if they're just camping. As if somebody would go there for the weekend to camp in any of these parks, even when they were at their best. Okay. I mean, I moved here never once, 35 years. We never once went camping anywhere in the city of Roseburg. Okay. There's way better places to camp if you live in Douglas County. Um, and so, so that idea anyway is, so hopefully you'll get some insight, because one of the things the homeless commission is, the People's Homeless Commission is going to focus on probably initially is finding places for people to be and pushing that issue. At least the people who are initiating the effort, I think we're all kind of behind this humanitarian crisis. Really, if you go down to Deer Creek Park, I mean, it's a mess. There's not even toilets down there, and people are living outside no matter what the weather is. It's horrible. It's inhumane, and we seem to ignore that. So anyway, anybody else have anything they want to say before we say goodnight?
Well, just briefly, because a couple weeks ago, I think the News Review had a article about Bernie and the Deer Creek camp, and they kind of had a shot up the hill there, Reservoir Hill, and Bernie was talking about he's trying to buy that house. It's up on the hill up there. I think you're familiar with it. It's on the left as you're going up Stevens. I'm quite familiar with that whole place. I worked on that. I worked there for the owner, and the long story, we could probably spend a whole SOPP meeting with my encounters working there, but I really failed to see exactly how that would be much of a homeless camp up there. It seemed like another scam, and unfortunately, that woman is a very vulnerable person for somebody like Bernie to come in contact with. Anyway, that's all I I just want to.
Well, maybe John, you and I after the show sometime we can talk about that particular thing.
Yeah,
Because although Bernie and his labor camps are still on our site, in our sites, the reality is what's happening at Deer Creek needs to be addressed, and the powers that be, our elected officials, continue to allow it to happen.
yeah,
And we're not talking about chasing them away because there's no place for them to go. There's a fallacy that there's any place for them to go other than outside. If they have it, bring it. I mean, people who are familiar with the homeless, I mean, the cops say that there are 300 people homeless. There's no way that we can put in Roseburg. That's the last number I've heard. Dane, do you know the numbers from the point in time count by any chance from 2025 or 2026 homeless
I didn't
count?
think it's released yet.
How
I'll
about this
correct.
year's haven't?
Yeah, I finally found 2024's. I mean, I don't know why they're not releasing, more.
It's the Trump administration. I mean,
Yeah.
it really is. It is because the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness and SOAR that used to do the mental health, the SAMHSA, mental health. They were dozed out, and so SOAR, which was the program that most people use to help homeless people get Social Security or SSI. It was specifically for that population, and it used to have a whole website and pages and a training program that the U.S. The what substance abuse, I can't remember the SAMHSA acronym stands for, that existed until the Trump administration, and they shut it down. Luckily, another organization who developed the training had it and has put that up, but the supports for that program no longer exists at all. And the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, which was created in the Bush II administration, so and it brought all these federal agencies together to try to deal with various issues about homelessness. It has nothing new on its website. It has nothing new from the Trump administration. So they haven't totally removed it, but you don't see the activity happening. It so they're just because they want to put concentration camps for homeless up. That's what Trump wants to do if he has his way.
Yeah, and that's
Anything else?
essentially what we have is a concentration camp, and so that's kind of why I was like, "This is ridiculous." And it was kind of like after I stopped being, being able to kind of live without investigating more, for lack of a better way of saying it. Like I had to start paying attention to this shit, and so we need, like just meeting people, talking to people, and learning more and more about the overlapping, experiences. And so even just up to the last city homeless commission meeting, Shelley Briggs Loosely, the chair of it, was saying, oh, I hope people use the mission more because they have so many empty beds. And it's like, God, you really are still talking about the mission, because it's kind of insane that they are still talking about that, because that doesn't really serve the people that need the support. And the mission is just like raking in money from, having all these empty beds. They're not having to deal with all these people. And so it's like, how does this church get credit for trying to do anything when they're not like adjusting anything to make it more, supportive of the people that they say that they're trying to serve. So it's like this circular shit. But they did get a porta potty in there over by the Adapt building. I was wondering who's responsible for that, and if the homeless commission ordered there to be a porta potty dropped off. But it's a handicap accessible porta potty. It's like, okay, we need about 5 more, probably, down the hole or something. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, their new directive is there should be 2 for every 10. So maybe I'll bring that up the next time we meet, because that was I mean, they're just
you're
not.
on the homeless commission, huh? I forgot about that.
I will just say, I think we should advocate for the 2 for 10. Like that's what they are writing in their policy. So we should have 2 for 10. And so just count how many people are in the park and go, that's how many, divide by 10, and that's how many bathrooms we need.
That would be a whole lot better than 3 for 150.
Yeah.
Because even during COVID, they didn't have they didn't have that ratio of toilets. And they knew where people were staying then because they were all in the same places.
My first meeting showed that there's a lot of opportunity to educate these people on the realities that exist for people living outside. And they don't understand the dynamics. And if you don't understand the dynamics of that, then either educate yourself or we need to find other people that have a little bit more understanding because, phone resources, they think everybody has a phone that they can use. That's not a reality of the today. And phones are not available for people. The bathroom, 2 for 10, then let's prove it. Let's show that in the park that they're running a camp for 150 people. So let's demonstrate how well that works by doing that. Because you need a break.
Good point. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt for about 3 more months, Dane, in your new position on the city's homeless commission. So I do always see you tomorrow night at for the discussion about Hastings Village. So anybody else?
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out today, especially Donovan, our special guest. It's really a pleasure to get to meet you and hear about what you're doing right now. And we look forward to helping you out in the future. Just reach out to any one of us. You've heard a lot of friends here. So please use them. Don't stay a stranger. And again,
wait a second. Wait, before you totally leave, Kevin, I just saw Larry's thing. Are we treating drug issue like a homeless issue? I think the answer is, from our point of view, no, but it's so heavily intertwined in what's happening with folks who are living outside right now. More of a barrier than I've ever seen it. In the 40 some years on and off that I've been dealing with homeless issues. So so what's your take on that, Dane? Are we dealing with addictions or substance abuse issues as homelessness?
I think they have, like I've tried to explain to them, is like 25% of the population are doing illicit substances. Alcohol is one of the bigger issues. There's no focus on alcohol. There's no money on alcohol. And we're not worried at all about the mental health issues. And we need to take mental health to the street to change mental health because there's a lot of mental health issues out there that are being just ignored. And we need to find a solution. I mean, that happened 30 years ago when they shut down the funding for mental health. And it's like, how do we get that back there? How do we get it on the street to help support people? How do we get, I don't think substance use disorder treatment, if it's illicit or if it's alcohol, there's so many ways we can navigate that to the street and help support people. I think we have some archaic ideas that we're stuck in and we need to fix those.
All right. We're done now.
Hang on, wait. I just want to, since we have like 15 minutes till 8.
Till it's 2 hours till we're all pumpkins. Go ahead.
Well, Miss Donovan, it'd be an hour, guys. I'm really going back on my
really?
word.
Well, I was gonna ask
No
Donovan,
one believes this. 2 hours, eventually 3. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask Donovan, any like, since you're the youngest person on the call here, like, what kind of music are you listening to, or do you have any favorite artists you're really digging these days? Because I'm just wondering about that.
I think recently I've been listening to a lot of like indie folk, um, like I guess a better term might be pop indie, like the Marias. I think is a good example. It's some Spanish, some English, but I like their music a lot right now.
Respect, honestly. That's good music.
Thank you.
Hey, there's a lot of protest songs coming out of this generation too. Hey, I watch my Facebook because I love old protest songs, but you know, the banks are made of marble.
Thank you, everybody, for coming
Yes.
out.
All right. Thank you.
All
See
right.
you next week.
Thanks. Oops.